Diddy was laughing. Not the kind of laugh you give in front of a camera, not the fake PR grin he wore on red carpets, but the real kind, the kind that rattles through your chest when you think you've won before the game even starts. That laugh echoed in every photo, every video, every soundbite that played on loop for over 2 decades. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that someone had been listening the entire time, not to the applause, but to the silence. That someone was Curtis J. And he wasn't laughing. He was watching, collecting, cataloging. Every meme, every caption, every offhand joke was a scalpel carving away the illusion. He didn't need to shout. He whispered. And now, the world was finally hearing the echo. It all started on Instagram, a place most people went to scroll, to forget, to be entertained. But Curtis J. used it differently. He used it like a crime scene wall stringing together years of images, phrases, hints dropped so casually you'd think he was just trolling. He wasn't. He was testifying, long before there was a trial. Years ago, he posted a photo, Diddy awkward at an award show, captioned with the words, "Check on love. This heat different." Most people laughed. It looked like petty drama, internet beef. But today, in 2025, with federal agents raiding properties and sealed testimonies being read aloud in hushed courtrooms, that caption sounds like a warning. Not just that, like the start of something no one was ready for. Back in New York, where both their empires began, people treated Curtis like a clown. Too loud, too messy, too eager to stir drama. But while Diddy was throwing lavish parties behind velvet ropes, Curtis was reading the guest lists, the locations, the patterns. And what he saw haunted him. He didn't talk, not the way others did. He just posted, sometimes a meme, sometimes a video from a live show, sometimes just words. They still pretending this didn't happen. And in the silence that followed, no rebuttal from Diddy no lawsuit, not even a denial, the message became louder than ever. One of the first breadcrumbs, a clip from The Breakfast Club. Charlemagne, mid-laugh, asked, "You don't go to Diddy's parties, do you?" And Curtis, not missing a beat, grinned but didn't smile. "Man, I don't play those games." The room cracked up, but his eyes didn't. That look, years later, haunts people. Because what did he see? What was he refusing? Why was he the only one not playing the game everyone else seemed to die to be part of? Then came the posts, the ones that made no sense until they made perfect sense. Every empire falls, even the ones built on silence. He posted that the day before the first major lawsuit against Diddy hit. Then another, a video of him sipping champagne, overlaid with the words, "They praying no old footage pops up." Days later, footage did. Nothing public, not yet. But sealed evidence began arriving in brown folders marked for judicial eyes only. Still, Curtis didn't name names. He didn't have to. The people who needed to understand already did. It wasn't the fans who caught it. It was the inner circle, the managers, the stylists, the bodyguards, the ones who were there, the ones who saw things and buried them in NDAs. They started whispering again. Some even reached out to journalists quietly, anonymously. But only after Curtis made it safe to, because his posts, disguised as jokes, were actually armor, protection. He was daring the truth to walk behind his footsteps, and when it finally did, it walked straight into a courtroom. The most chilling part? The first real explosion didn't come from him. It came from a bodyguard, Rihanna's to be exact. A man whose job had been silence, who had once signed the kind of paperwork that makes memory feel like a crime. He stood on the witness stand and told the court about parties, about rooms that locked from the outside, about women who left different, about Julian, a young man last seen at one of those events, never heard from again. And as the words left his mouth, someone pulled up a 2017 Instagram post from Curtis J. A black and white photo, Diddy comb in the background. Caption: "The circle is small for a reason. Not everyone makes it out the room." The courtroom went still. The connection was undeniable. This wasn't trolling. This was time-stamped truth. But if you think that's when the world finally believed him, you're wrong. Because even then, even as the headlines swirled and news anchors stumbled over the allegations, people still laughed. Because laughing is easier than believing. Because if Curtis was right, then the industry people worshipped was built on horror. So they brushed it off, again. Until Curtis posted something new. A screenshot of a Scarface clip, the moment when Tony realizes the walls are closing in. Caption: "Some of y'all don't even see it yet." That was the same week agents raided Diddy Combs' Miami property. The same week, a sealed document referenced surveillance tapes from music executive residences. The same week, 3 more witnesses came forward. At some point, the laughter started to dry up. The comment sections went from laughing emojis to stunned silence, to questions, to fear. People started scrolling back, looking at old posts, reading between the lines, connecting dots he laid out years before. Like the time he said, "Protect your kids. Industry don't care who they become if the check clears." Or the one that read, "I already shook hands with my demons. Some of y'all still dancing with yours." At the time, people thought it was bravado. Now, they weren't so sure. In the courtroom, the judge asked for silence more times than usual. The tension was heavy. Not the kind that comes from anger, but from dread. Because every time a new testimony came forward, someone somewhere found a post that matched. And the public slowly realized Curtis J. wasn't a troll. He was a historian, a prophet in gifs and captions. And Diddy Comb? He hadn't said a word. Not in public, not online, not in interviews, just silence, just lawyers, just a rapidly crumbling empire with no voice behind it. Meanwhile, Curtis posted a photo, a courtroom sketch, Diddy Comb, slouched, alone, no caption, just an emoji. The laugh had stopped, not just online but in the room, in the city, in the industry. Because now, people were scrolling not for fun, but for truth. Digging through the past like archaeologists. Each post a fossil, each caption a clue. And Curtis? He just waited, calm, calculated, watching the world finally read the story he had been writing all along. A story in memes, a timeline in jokes, a testimony no one took seriously until it was too late. Because now, the courtroom wasn't just a legal battleground, it was a stage. And the man who set it all in motion? He wasn't even in the room. He didn't need to be. He already said everything, and the world was finally listening. The reporters didn't know what to write first. Their notepads were full, but their hands trembled just enough that some of the words came out slanted, broken, half-spelled, like even the ink was unsure whether it was witnessing scandal or scripture. They had covered celebrity trials before, drug busts, assault cases, PR disasters, but this felt different. The energy was different. The silence was weaponized. When the courtroom doors opened that morning, It wasn't just the press that arrived early, it was the hush, the kind that fills the air before lightning strikes, and it wasn't coming from the judge's bench or the prosecution table. It came from a space larger than the building itself, from a digital presence that had haunted this case before it even existed. Curtis J. hadn't posted anything in 48 hours. That was unheard of. No memes, no shade, no popcorn emojis, just silence. And that silence spoke louder than the headlines, because now everyone knew what it meant. Something was coming. The prosecution laid out a new exhibit. They didn't introduce it with a dramatic flourish. No, Your Honor, this changes everything. They simply handed a flash drive to the clerk. She crossed the courtroom slowly, her heels echoing like gunshots. The judge nodded once. The screen lit up. It was a still image at first, fuzzy, dated. You could tell it came from a time before 4K, before people polished reality. A room with velvet curtains, dim lighting, faces blurred, all but one Diddy comb. And even then, his face looked unfamiliar. Not the poised mogul, not the brand ambassador. Something else. Something raw. There was a timestamp in the corner. The date matched a post from Curtis in 2018. The post had read, "Y'all keep thinking this is about music." Back then, people laughed. The comments were full of fire emojis, crying, laughing faces, even the occasional insult. But now, in this sterile, fluorescent-lit room, with attorneys shifting in their seats and spectators holding their breath, the meaning hit differently. The judge didn't allow sound, only the video. No one spoke. The frames moved slowly, each one like a confession. At one point, you could see someone being led away. Blurred, yes, but the body language was clear. Resistance. And everyone in the room, reporters, lawyers, even the bailiff, instinctively turned to look at the defense table. Diddy Combe sat motionless, eyes fixed forward. No flinch, no expression, as if he'd seen it already. Maybe he had. Maybe this wasn't a surprise to him. Maybe the only surprise was that it was finally being shown to the world. Meanwhile, Curtis J. posted. Finally. After 2 days of digital silence, he dropped a clip. No caption, just a short video of a chessboard. One black piece standing, all white pieces fallen. In the comments, fans and followers erupted. Some joked, some speculated, but most understood. He had waited, and now the move had been made. That's how Curtis played the game. Not with noise, but with timing. While other artists went live to rant, he scheduled his silence like a sermon. While Diddy Combe had spent years curating an image of power and benevolence, Curtis crafted a mirror one made of clues. People were starting to realize he had never needed to yell, because when you tell the truth in whispers, it haunts longer. Back in the courtroom, a new witness took the stand. She wasn't famous, not a celebrity, not a model, a housekeeper. She worked at one of Diddy Combs' penthouses during the early 2010s. Her voice was steady, but her eyes darted. She spoke about the guests, the back rooms, the strict instructions, how certain names never appeared on paper, how certain doors were locked from the inside and others, disturbingly, from the outside. Then she mentioned something that stopped everything. A name, Julian. The same one mentioned by Rihanna's bodyguard the day before. And, suddenly, the courtroom wasn't just a theater of justice, it was a funeral for secrets. Curtis posted again. 2 words. "Y'all ready?" Nothing else. But no one needed context anymore. The world was ready. or at least no longer able to pretend it wasn't. Fans began resurfacing old interviews, old tweets, old clips where he hinted at things. The infamous quote from 2020 came up again. "Some of y'all still think it's just parties. I know better." He had said that during a promotional tour. Everyone laughed then. He didn't. The problem wasn't that Curtis had said too much. It was that people had listened too little. Because it's easier to dismiss someone when they speak in riddles. It's easier to sleep at night believing the powerful aren't monsters. But now the curtain was gone. And what lay behind it wasn't mystery, it was memory. By nightfall, Curtis had gone quiet again. But his silence now was different. It didn't feel like a pause. It felt like a stare, like he was watching the world read what he wrote years ago in meme format, and finally understand it was never a joke. He had been circling this story in plain sight. He had been the narrator of a truth that no one wanted to hear until it was read aloud in a courtroom. Back in the courthouse, the clerk delivered another folder to the bench. The judge read it, then looked at the defense attorney. No words, just a nod, the kind of nod that meant we're past the point of denial. The screen went dark. The day's session ended. People filed out quietly. Outside, the air in New York was heavy, not just with humidity, but with a collective realization. This wasn't about a feud. This wasn't music industry gossip. This was systemic. This was what happens when silence is currency, and NDAs are used as bandages for open wounds. As people checked their phones, a final post from Curtis went up. An old image, a 2000s-era party, Diddy comb in the background. The caption, "Some of y'all still going to those parties." Only now, no one was laughing. That night, the internet didn't sleep. Threads unraveled like fabric set on fire. Twitter, Reddit, private Discord servers filled with screenshots, timelines, side-by-side comparisons of old Curtis J. posts and newly surfaced courtroom documents. People weren't just consuming content anymore. They were connecting dots like detectives, decoding jokes they once ignored, replaying interviews with the kind of focus usually reserved for conspiracy documentaries. They didn't call it beef now. They called it evidence. One user posted a side-by-side comparison. On the left, a meme Curtis had dropped in 2019 Diddy Combs' face, crudely edited over a Game of Thrones villain, the caption, "Winter's comin', hope you kept the vault closed." On the right, an excerpt from today's courtroom hearing mentioning a hidden security system and missing hard drives from one of Diddy Combs' properties. It wasn't coincidence anymore. It was a blueprint. In Miami, in Atlanta, in LA, journalists who had once brushed off Curtis's online antics were suddenly requesting interviews. Not with him, he wasn't answering calls, but with the people around him. His former assistants, his stylists, a few artists he'd mentored. No one had a full picture, but they all said the same thing. Curtis always knew more than he said. And when he said anything at all, it was never accidental. Meanwhile, back in New York, the courthouse remained under heavy security. The judge had ordered tighter access after whispers of media leaks and intimidation. But inside the chambers, something more dangerous than exposure was growing: momentum. The prosecution had requested permission to submit historical digital evidence. Translation, posts, captions, live streams, memes. The things people laughed at online now lined the edge of official court documentation. One of the younger paralegals, barely out of law school, whispered to a colleague, It's like he left a breadcrumb trail before the forest even caught fire." His colleague nodded, eyes on the screen showing Diddy Combs' 2015 interview. The one where he'd smiled just a bit too wide while denying everything. The one Curtis had clipped and posted with the caption, "Actors win awards. Liars win silence." That clip was now cued for playback the following morning. For the jury. For the world. Curtis posted again just before dawn. It was a black square. No photo, no video, just text, white, stark, clean. "Silence used to protect the powerful. Now it protects the truth." Within minutes, the comments blew up. Not with jokes this time, not with trolling, but with testimonials, stories. Former assistants saying, "I never said anything because I thought I imagined it." Dancers who remembered things they weren't supposed to see. A DJ who used to open at Diddy Comb events and wrote, "Now I understand why there were no mirrors in those back rooms. Too many truths would have looked back." Curtis didn't respond. He never did. He let the comments do the work. Because once the truth has a voice, you don't need to yell it echoes on its own. By noon, the next wave of testimony had begun. A former music executive, face blurred for anonymity, spoke through video from a protected location. She didn't name Curtis J. She didn't have to. The prosecution asked, "Did you ever notice anyone drawing attention to this behavior before the public was aware?" She answered, "There was one person who saw it." He said it like a joke, but it was the most serious thing in the room. Across the country, a clip from a 2017 award show interview surfaced. Diddy Comb was asked about Curtis's latest meme mocking his lifestyle. He'd laughed and waved it off. "He always jokes. That's what he does." But even then, his smile had a tremble. His eyes darted, just for a second, like a man who recognized a wolf under a clown's mask. And Curtis had reposted that interview back then, too, with a single-word caption, "Deflection." Today, someone found it and paired it with a headline. "Federal investigators confirm pattern of hidden settlements and threats within Combs' empire." Even the skeptics had grown quiet. Late that evening, the prosecution asked to admit one final exhibit for the day. It was an Instagram story, screenshotted, archived, printed, dated June 2nd, 2020. A video from Curtis, blurry at first. Then it pans over a studio console. Empty chairs, no music, just silence. The caption, "You think it's about the sound. It was never about the sound." The judge didn't interrupt. The jury didn't flinch. For the first time in weeks, Diddy Comb broke his stillness. His hands shifted. Fingers curled in on themselves, because now the memes were in the courtroom. The jokes were on the record. The troll was now the chronicler. And every frame was starting to feel like a page from a story the industry didn't want written. Back at home, Curtis watched. Not the court feed, he didn't need to. He'd already seen it all before. He simply opened his laptop, clicked a folder labeled Untitled, and stared at hundreds of screenshots, drafts, videos, unposted, untouched, stories not yet told. He poured himself a drink, not to celebrate, to wait. Because the next move wasn't his. It never was. He just played off what others tried to hide. And when they slipped, when the next silence cracked under pressure, he'd post again. This time he wasn't just holding the vault. He was holding the key. The next morning arrived not with sunlight, but with pressure. Not the kind you see, but the kind you feel hanging in the air like smoke before fire. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had doubled. Inside, the temperature somehow dropped despite the rise in tension. Spectators whispered. Reporters refreshed their feeds every 10 seconds. Even the clerks moved slower, as if fearing they might accidentally become part of the story. No one wanted to be in the background of the next viral frame. Not today. Not when the court had announced that social media posts with judicial relevance would now be formally entered into evidence, not just read, displayed, on record. And the first. A post from Curtis J., dated December 2019. A selfie. Slightly pixelated. He's standing in a parking garage. Behind him, blurry and far away, is Diddy comb. The caption reads, "It's the quiet ones you gotta watch. I'm not talking about me." Back then, people joked about it being a diss. Now, the room didn't laugh. Because in court, during cross-examination, a former associate had testified that meetings between Diddy Comb and his handlers, yes, handlers, often occurred in isolated locations with no surveillance. Parking garages, basements, VIP lounges with blacked-out windows. The kind of places where power doesn't wear a name tag. That morning, Curtis posted again. 3 words. No image, no tag, just, "Still not bluffing." It was all he needed to say. The next witness had a familiar face, not a celebrity, but familiar because she had once gone viral years ago for speaking out against another artist's abuse. Her credibility had been attacked then, her name dragged. But now, the court had her under oath. She adjusted the mic, cleared her throat, and began listing names, places, patterns. At one point, the prosecution paused her testimony and pulled up another Curtis Post one that mirrored her claims almost to the date. In the background of the post, the same event, the same city, different angle, different truth. You could hear gasps from the benches. The defense objected, but the judge allowed it. Because now, the posts were not just admissible, they were predictive. Curtis had said it before it happened, repeatedly, and each time he'd been dismissed. Not anymore. At noon, the courtroom went into recess. Outside, the media had stopped guessing and started admitting. Headlines changed from "ongoing trial turns chaotic" to 50 Cent's old posts becoming timeline of terror. His memes were no longer punchlines. They were footnotes in a legal document. A CNN anchor actually said the words, "If this keeps up, 50 Cent might be the first person in history to testify through Instagram." They weren't wrong. But what people hadn't yet realized was that the most damning post hadn't even been shown. That changed after lunch. Court resumed with a witness brought in via private feed. Voice disguised. Face obscured. A man shaky, slow-spoken but clear. He said he had worked events, the private ones, the ones nobody mentioned. He described logistics, who entered through which door, who got escorted out through side exits. He detailed code words used by security and the subtle signals that meant someone was too intoxicated to give consent, but nothing was ever paused. He spoke about a girl. 19, new to the industry, invited as a +1. She left that party in silence and was never seen again. He said her name, then asked, "Can I show the post now?" The prosecution nodded. The screen lit up with a tweet from Curtis J., posted 2 weeks after that date. It read, "She was too young. Y'all knew. Y'all filmed. Now y'all forget? Cool. I won't." The gallery went cold. It wasn't just a connection anymore. It was a witness corroborating a post. Not fiction, not trolling, but digital testimony left out in the open like a message in a bottle, only now retrieved by the tide of justice. Diddy didn't move. His lawyer whispered something in his ear, but his hands were clenched. No smile, no PR grin, just stone and silence. That night, social media exploded again. Only now, it wasn't celebrity blogs or fan pages. It was people who had once worked in the same circles. Anonymous Twitter users began posting, "I always thought those jokes had truth. I saw things at parties I wish I could unsee." Curtis warned us. One post read, "Imagine living in a world where the meme account was more honest than the media." But Curtis said nothing. No stories, no clapbacks, just one video, a short reel, a typewriter, black and white. The letters appear one by one. If you think this is the whole story, you've already missed the next one. Then it cuts to black. The comment section went wild, because now everyone was wondering the same thing. What else does he have? What hasn't he posted? If this was what he let the public see, what's in the vault? That question echoed louder than any statement made in court. The next morning, something strange happened. Journalists tried to reach Diddy legal team. No response. Reporters outside his Atlanta estate were told he had left the city. The courthouse delayed the trial until Monday, and then, unprompted, Curtis posted again. This time, a selfie, no caption, just his reflection in a mirror, except the mirror was cracked, and through the crack, barely visible, was a folder on the desk behind him. Its label, Actee 2. The message was clear. He wasn't finished. And the trial? That was just the intermission.